Here with Locked On Panthers host Julian Council talking about the hiring of Frank Reich as the 6th head coach in Carolina franchise history. Julian, it was a thorough process. 9 candidates, 2.5 weeks. Yep. Why do you think David Tepper and this internal search committee ultimately landed on Frank Reich?
Well, I appreciate that they casted a wide net, and that's something I wanted them to do from the beginning, knowing that he had absolutely bombed on the Matt Rule hire. Go out there, see who's qualified, talk to veteran experienced coaches in the NFL, and then find the right man for the job, knowing that you effectively wasted 3 seasons on the field. Now, off the field, certainly they've been able to make good additions, and we've seen it even on the field as well. But I feel like they landed on Frank Reich because he's basically the exact opposite of what Matt Rule was. Matt Rule came in here as a hotshot college coach who, yes, he didn't have the success of a Kirby Smart or Nick Saban, but someone who turned around programs in Temple and Baylor who historically aren't the top upper echelon of college football. He came here with very little NFL experience, 1 year as an assistant offensive line coach under Tom Coughlin in New York, and his staff reflected how green he was in the NFL. So typical you see from these coaching hires, whether it's on the NFL level or at the college level, they try to find the complete opposite of their ex. And that is Frank Reich, who's 61, who's right close same age as David Tepper, 65. Yeah. He's an experienced play caller in the NFL. He's an experienced head coach, having success in the NFL. Experience. That is the operative word. That's why they landed on Frank Reich. And more importantly, because he's on the offense side of the ball, knowing that this team is going to likely bring in a young rookie quarterback via the first round of the draft, they wanted someone who's had experience working with those quarterbacks and has had success at a high level in the National Football League.
I don't want to push this Steve Wilks part of this conversation to the end because I think it deserves to be close to the top. I think there's a lot of people out there, even if they like Frank Reich as a head coach for Carolina, that are gutted, that are upset about him being passed over for Frank Reich. And obviously Wilks is part of the Brian Flores lawsuit against the NFL alleging racism in the hiring practice league-wide for head coaches. And his attorneys have put out a statement saying that, obviously that they're pretty upset about this. So fans are grappling with this, a lot of them. Yeah. Do you think David Tepper should be answering to that part of this process?
I think he needs to, certainly to understand what more could Steve Wilks have done. And I'm sitting here thinking that Frank Reich is a good hire. I have no idea if it's going to work out, but knowing what he's done in Indianapolis and the success that he's had also in Philadelphia as a play caller and working with Nick Foles in that Super Bowl winning season, he's a good coach. I think he can have success here in Carolina. So you can be excited about Frank Reich coming here and also understand the optics of Steve Wilks not getting this job when at 1-4, Robbie Anderson getting traded away, Chris McCaffrey getting traded away, who's been fantastic in San Francisco and healthy, mind you. All the coaches that have left, whether they were fired by Steve Wilks or left on their own accord to follow Matt Rule to Nebraska, you can look at all of those things and see this team get turned around, be 6-6 in 12 weeks under Steve Wilks, and just wonder, what more could this man have done to get this job? So certainly, someone should ask David Tepper that question whenever he meets with the media. I guarantee you he won't answer it because he didn't answer any questions last time when he decided to fire Matt Rule. He wouldn't even tell us why Matt Rule was fired. So is he going to tell people why Steve Wilks didn't get the job? I find it hard to believe. Maybe he will. But certainly it just shows why Wilks, why Flores, and why a lot of these minority coaches in this league, black coaches, let's just go out there and say it, are so frustrated about the NFL hiring practice. The Rooney Rule, while it might be good as far as in practice, it does not matter. It does not work. You cannot force these coaches or these owners to hire minority coaches. You can't force them to do that. They're going to hire who they want to feel comfortable hiring. You heard it when David Tepper hired Matt Rule in the first place, saying he dresses like crap like me. He's from the same area as me. He related to Matt Rule. These owners want to hire people they can relate to. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, a lot of these black coaches are just not relatable enough to these owners and not seen as capable of leading these teams, to where Steve Wilks, who does a great job, has galvanized the locker room, a lot of this fan base, gets passed over for Frank Reich, who is a good coach. He deserves this job. But Steve Wilks absolutely earned this opportunity in Carolina, has earned an opportunity elsewhere, and received no further interviews.
David Tepper, wouldn't put a number on what an incredible job for Steve Wilks would be. You can't really quantify it, but from a pro football sense, to do all of what you just said and flip a culture and an identity on the field overnight, that is incredible to me. How does Frank Reich come in here and gain the trust of this locker room after the guy that they pined for openly is not getting the job. And does that matter that they wanted Steve Wilks?
It doesn't really honestly matter. It's good that the team was behind Steve, and that's certainly positive, and it would have been a part of the resume to allow Steve Wilks to potentially get this job. It gave him the opportunity to interview for this job. So, yes, that's a good thing. I don't necessarily think it hurts Frank Reich because these men are all professionals. They all understand that there's a job to do. Let's go out there and win football games. And I think they're going to look at Frank Reich and see what he's been able to do as a head coach in Indianapolis, as a offensive coordinator in Philadelphia, but also as a player in this league, and respect who he is as a man and as a coach, and be open to him coming in here and trying to help this team get back to winning football games, because they haven't been winning football games. And Steve Wilks is great. Unfortunately, they fell short. Do I place it all on Steve Wilks? Absolutely not. I think these guys are able to handle the situation because they're professionals. And also, they want to probably be here and have a job here, because if they're not going to be on board, then they're not going to be Carolina Panthers, and they might not get another opportunity elsewhere.
Julian, if you combined the respective quarterback carousels the last 3 or 4 years of Carolina and with the Colts with Frank Reich, it would be like the scariest ride at the amusement park. The next step is quarterback, right?
Yeah.
And does hiring Frank Reich either change or enhance your view of what the Panthers will do next at that position?
Oh, it's got to enhance it for sure. And Frank Reich, you bring up Carolina and Indianapolis and the parallels between the Colts having the quarterback merry-go-round. Now, at least theirs had Andrew Luck and Phillip Rivers for 2 seasons, where, Jacoby Brissett was fine and Wentz was okay until, he wasn't, and Matt Ryan, the whole fiasco there this season. And we saw when Frank Reich had a quarterback, he had success. And when he didn't have a quarterback, well, he still won games, but not nearly at the rate that he won when he had Luck and Phillip Rivers there in Indianapolis. So he understands what it's like and how it can change the trajectory of a franchise when you have a franchise quarterback and when you don't have a franchise quarterback. And David Tepper sat here for 5 seasons and seeing the Panthers not having, and they had the one that deteriorated right before their eyes in Cam Newton. So I imagine if Frank Reich came here telling David Tepper, like, hey, I want a young quarterback who I can mold, who I can work with, and we can grow together, and we can get this franchise back to being in the playoffs and bring that sustained success that David Tepper told us that he was going to bring to Carolina when he fired Ron Rivera, 3-4 years ago now. So I do think that with Reich here, with his background, that absolutely it's only going to enhance and further the Panthers' odds of taking a quarterback there early in the first round of the NFL draft.
And you mentioned his background. He's the first Panthers full-time head coach in franchise history with an offensive resume.
Yes.
I mean, does that help how you view the evolution of this franchise? Does it help the evolution of this franchise? You look at the final 4 teams in the NFL right now, they're all guided by offensive coaches.
Yeah, they're also guided just by good coaches. Like Andy Reid's a good coach. We've seen Kyle Shanahan. He's a good coach. Now, he's a play caller, just like Andy Reid. Like, they're excellent play callers, but they have to lead these men. And that's the thing, we get so tied up in, all right, got to get a good play caller. Well, we've seen that not work a lot of places. Like Josh McDaniels, considered a great play caller. How's he gone about being a leader in Denver and then this first year out in Las Vegas with the Raiders? Leadership is important. And everything I've read about Frank Reich, look, he went to seminary, so he's a man of Christ, if that's something you care about and believe in. But you got that. So he's respected back in Indianapolis. He's been respected everywhere he's gone. So I don't imagine that's not going to carry over here to Carolina. And then offense, defense, it doesn't really matter. You have to get the right people on your staff. And from what I've read, it looks like he's going to be more of a CEO head coach, which would go alignment with as far as, hey, let me just lead everybody underneath me and be that guy who's the face of the organization and has all the ducks in a row and everyone on the same page, and then hire the right people. So certainly it's great to have an offensive background. Hey, but if it had been, he still needs to figure out the defense. Because, hey, if you're an offensive guy, great, but who's going to coach defense? Gus Bradley, maybe, someone else. There's 3 elements of football: special teams, offense, defense. You can't get too caught up in just one position. And isn't John Harbaugh a special teams coach? And he's had a lot of successful offenses and defenses in Baltimore. So I don't really look at it as being all that big of a deal.
I mean, Bubba Ventrone, who was with Reich in Indianapolis, a special teams coordinator who got a little bit of buzz for head coach. So, I get your point there. We were talking offline about this a little bit, about how this is going to be presented publicly on Tuesday, how Frank Reich is going to be introduced. Matt Rule, it seemed like a coronation. David Tepper saying to the people, look what I've given you.
The pep rally.
The next Chuck Noll in the Panthers bubble, all the pomp and circumstance. I kind of get the feeling it'll be a little toned down from that. But what do you think, after watching this process play out, David Tepper learned from his first go-round?
Whew, man. Experience matters. I think that's probably what he absolutely learned when you just look at the candidates and who two of the finalists were. And you can even bring in Kellen Moore there as well, the offensive coordinator there in Dallas, who of the young OCs that he talked to, like Shane Steichen, like a Ken Dorsey, like Ben Johnson, who was apparently favored, they never talked to, those guys only had 1 year calling plays, where Kellen Moore's had 4 years in Dallas as the lead play caller. So that's a lot of experience even for a guy at a young age. So I think he understood that experience matters, that having a real, I don't want to say the wrong thing about Matt Rule, because I do think he's a good guy at heart, but someone who really has the right temperament for this job is important. And David Tepper's someone who's still learning on the job as well as an owner, and that's part of the reason why he kept Marty Herney around for an extra year, probably longer than a lot of people thought he should have, so you can understand the ins and outs of the NFL. And he's learning along the way that you got to have a guy who understands how to operate in the locker room, like Steve Wilks was. You need to have a guy who understands how to run an offense and just work in an organization. So I think those are some of the things that he's learned throughout this process as he talked to a lot of these coaches and eventually landed on Frank Reich as his new head man.
All right, apparently we will meet Coach Reich on Tuesday. That gives us 4 or 5 days to try to fill the hashtag content machine.
What are we going to do?
Your plans are. It's going to be an interesting few days. I know that you'll have plenty on Locked On Panthers. Julian Council, thanks for joining us as always.